This is second part of nature of the federal system. This is nothing but the plain reading of our constitution. Position of the states in the federation. In the United States, since the states had a sovereign and independent existence prior to the formation of the federation, they were reluctant to give up that sovereignty any further than what was necessary for forming a national government for the purpose of conducting their common purposes. As a result, the Constitution of the Federation contains a number of safeguards for the protection of state rights, for which there was no need in India, as the states were not sovereign entities before. These points of difference deserve particular attention. While the residuary powers are reserved to the states by the American Constitution, these are assigned to the Union by our Constitution, Article 248. This alone, of course, is not sufficient to put an end to the federal character of our political system, because it only relates to the mode of distribution of powers. Our Constitution has simply followed the Canadian system in vesting the residuary power in the Union. While the Constitution of the United States of America merely drew up the constitution of the national government, leaving it in the main to the state to continue to preserve their original constitution, the Constitution of India lays down the constitution for the state and no state save Jammu and Kashmir has a right to determine its own constitution. In the matter of amendment of the constitution, again, the part assigned to the state is minor as compared with that of union. The doctrine underlying a federation of American type is that the union is the result of an agreement between the component units, so that no part of the constitution which embodies the compact can be altered without the consent of the covenanting parties. This doctrine is adopted with variation by most of the federal systems, but in India, except in a few specified matters affecting the federal structure, the states need not be consulted in the matter of amendments of the bulk of the Constitution, which may be effected by a bill in the Union Parliament passed by a special majority. Though there is a division of powers between the Union and the states, there is provision in our Constitution for the exercise of control by the Union both over the administration and legislation of the states. Legislation by states shall be subject to disallowance by the President were reserved by the Governor for his consideration. Again, the governors of a state shall be appointed by the President of the Union and shall hold office during the pleasure of the President. These ideas are repugnant to the Constitution of United States or of Australia, but are to be found in the Canadian Constitution. The American Federation has been described by its Supreme Court as an indestructible union composed of indestructible states. It comprises two propositions. The union cannot be destroyed by any state seceding from the union at its will. Conversely, it is not possible for the federal government to withdraw the map of the United States by forming new states or by altering the boundaries of the states as they existed in the time of the compact without the consent of the legislature of the states concerned. The same principle is adopted in the Australian Constitution to make the Commonwealth indissoluble, with the further safeguard superadded that a popular referendum is required in the affected state to alter its boundaries. It has been already seen that the first proposition has been accepted by the makers of our constitution, and it is not possible for the states of the Union of India to exercise any right of secession. Sorry. It should not be noted in this context that by the 16th Amendment of the Constitution in 1963, it has been made clear that even advocacy of secession will not have the protection of the freedom of expression. But just the contrary of the second proposition had been embodied in our Constitution. Under our Constitution, it is possible for the Union Parliament to recognize the states or to alter their boundaries by a simple majority in the ordinary process of legislation. The Constitution does not require that the consent of the legislature of the states is necessary for enabling Parliament to make such laws. Only the President has to ascertain the views of the legislature of the affected states to recommend a bill for this purpose to Parliament. Even this obligation is not mandatory insofar as the President is competent to fix a time limit within which a state must express its views, if at all proviso to Article 3 as amended in the Indian Federation. Thus, the states are not indestructible unit as in USA. The ease with which the federal organization may be reshaped by an ordinary legislation by the Union Parliament has been demonstrated by the enactment of the States Reorganization Act 1956, which reduced the number of states from 27 to 14 within a period of 6 years from the commencement of the Constitution. The same process of disintegration of existing states effected by unilateral legislation by Parliament has led to the formation subsequently of several new states: Gujarat, Nagaland, Haryana, Karnataka, Meghalaya, Himachal Pradesh, Manipur, Sikkim, Tripura, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, Goa. It is natural, therefore, that question might arise in foreign minds as to the nature of federalism introduced by the Indian Constitution. Not only does the Constitution offer no guarantee to the states against affecting their territorial integrity without their consent, there is no theory of equality of state rights underlying the federal scheme in our Constitution, since it is not the result of any agreement between the states. One of the essential principles of American federalism is the equality of the component states under the Constitution, irrespective of their size or population. This principle is reflected in the equality of representation of the states in the upper house of the federal legislature, that is the Senate, which is supposed to safeguard the status and interest of the states in the federal organization. To this is superadded the guarantee that no state may, without its consent, be deprived of its equal representation in the Senate. Article 5. Under our Constitution, there is no equality of representation of the states in the Council of States. As given in the 4th schedule, the number of members for the several states varies from 1 to 31. In view of such composition of the upper chamber, the federal safeguard against the interests of the lesser states being overridden by the interests of the larger or more populated states is absent under our Constitution. Nor can our Council of States be correctly described as a federal chamber insofar as it contains the nominated element of 12 members as against 238 representatives of state and union territories. Status of Sikkim. Another novel feature introduced into the Indian federalism was the admission of Sikkim as an associate state without being a member of the Union of India as defined in Article 1, which was made possible by the insertion of Article 2A into the Constitution by the Constitution 35th Amendment 1974. This innovation was, however, short-lived, and its legitimacy has lost all practical interest since all that was done by the 35th Amendment Act 1974 has been undone by the 36th Amendment Act 1975, by which Sikkim has been admitted into the Union of India as a full-fledged state under the first schedule with effect from 26th April 1975 under Chapter 6 post. The original federal scheme of the Indian Constitution comprising states and the Union Territories has thus been left unimpaired. Of course, certain special provisions has been laid down in the new Article 371F as regards Sikkim to meet the special circumstances of that state. Article 371G makes certain special provisions relating to the state of Mizoram, while Article 371H and 371I insert special provision for Arunachal Pradesh and Goa. Nature of the polity as a radical solution of the problem of reconciling national unity with state rights, the framers of the American Constitution made a logical division of everything essential to sovereignty and created a dual polity with a dual citizenship, a double set of official and a double system of courts. An American is a citizen not only of the state in which he resides but also the United States, that is, of the Federation, under different conditions, and both the federal and state governments, each independent of the other, operate directly upon the citizen, who is the subject to two governments and owes allegiance to both. But Indian Constitution, like the Canadian, does not introduce any double citizenship but one citizenship, which the citizenship of India and birth or residence in a particular state does not confer any separate status as a citizen of the state. As regards officials, similarly, the federal and state governments in the United States have their own officials to administer their respective laws and functions, but there is no such division amongst the public officials in India. The majority of the public servants are employed by the states, but they administer both the union of the state laws as are applicable to their respective states by which they are employed. Our Constitution provides for the creation of all India services, but they are to be common to union and states. Members of Indian Administrative Service appointed by the union may be employed either under some union department, say Home or Defense, or under the state government, and their services are transferable, and even when they are employed under a union government, they have to administer both the union and state laws as are applicable to the matter in question. But even while serving under a state, for the time being, a member of all India services can be dismissed or removed only by the union government, even though the state government is competent to initiate disciplinary proceedings for that purpose. In USA, there is bifurcation of the judiciary as between the federal and state government. Cases arising out of federal constitution and federal laws are tried by the federal courts, while state courts deal with cases arising out of state constitution and state laws. But in India, the same system of courts headed by the Supreme Court will administer both the union and state laws as they are applicable to the cases coming up for adjudication. The machinery for election, accounts and audits is also similarly integrated. The Constitution of India empowers the union to entrust its executive functions to a state by its consent, Article 258, and a state to entrust its executive function to the union. Similarly, Article 258A, no question of surrender of sovereignty by one government to the other stands in the way of this smooth cooperative arrangement. While the federal system is prescribed by normal times, the Indian Constitution enables the federal government to acquire the strength of a unitary system in emergencies. While in normal times the union executive is entitled to give directions to the state governments in respect of specified matters, when a proclamation of emergency is made, the power to give directions extends to all matters, and the legislative power of the union extends to state subjects. Article 353, 354, 357. The wisdom of these emergency provisions relating to external aggression as distinguished from internal disturbance has been demonstrated by the fact that during the Chinese aggression of 1962 or the Pakistan aggression of 1965, India could stand as one man, pooling all the resources of the states, notwithstanding the federal organization. Even in the normal working, the federal system is given the strength of a unitary system by endowing the union with much exclusive power of legislation, as has been found necessary in other countries to meet the ever-growing national exigencies, and over the above that, by enabling the union legislature to take up some subject of state competence if required in the national interest. Thus, even apart from emergencies, the union parliament may assume legislative power though temporarily over any subject included in the state list if the Council of State's second chamber of parliament resolves by a 2/3 vote that such legislation is necessary in the national interest. Article 249. There is of course a federal element in this provision, inasmuch as such expansion of the power of union into the state sphere is possible only with the consent of the Council of States where the states are represented. But in actual practice, it will mean an additional weapon in the hands of the union vis-a-vis the states, so long as the same party has a solid majority in both the houses of the union parliament. Even though there is distribution of powers between the union and states as under the federal system, the distribution has a strong central bias. The powers of states are hedged in with various restrictions which impede their sovereignty even within the sphere limited to them by the distribution of powers basically provided by the Constitution. This is all about today's nature of the federal system. Thanks, regards.